Dilip Kumar, Part 10. I began to view movies regularly, braving the possibility of being caught by someone known to my family. I must confess that the new identity as Dilip Kumar had a liberating impact on me. I told myself Yusuf had no need to see or study films, but Dilip surely needed to accumulate observations of how actors reproduced the emotions, speech, and behavior of fictitious characters in front of a camera. So I started seeing films, one film a day at two successive shows. It was necessary to view the same film at the 3:30 p.m. and 6:30 p.m. shows because in the first viewing something that caught my attention could be reviewed closely in the second viewing. Hence, I had to leave the studio early for a few days. I started getting the hang of it as I watched Hollywood actors and actresses like James Stewart, Paul Mooney, Ingrid Bergman, and Clark Gable, but it did not take long for me to realize the essence, which was that an actor should not imitate or copy another actor if he can help it, because the actor who impresses you has consciously and even painstakingly molded an overt personality and laid down his own ground rules to bring that personality effectively on the screen. I understood very early on while I was at Bombay Talkies itself, following such films as Milan, that I had to be my own inspiration and teacher, and it was imperative to evolve with the passage of time. S. Mukherjee Sahab was a great help when I discussed with him such topics as the evolution of an actor or the elusive phenomenon of stardom that actors aspire to attain. Ashok Bhaiya was a phenomenally successful star at the time, but he was so unaffected by his stardom. I remember an evening when he decided to travel with me and P. Jairaj to Churchgate by the local train. We had purchased tickets for a film and he was insistent on going to the cinema hall by local train. At the Malath station, when people saw him and recognized him, there was a wave of adulatory attention, but he seemed unmindful of the gasps of admiration as he talked to us. When the train arrived, a crowd got into the compartment that we boarded, and people started talking to him about Kangan and Jhula and Kismet, and he responded warmly and wittily. I was witnessing the phenomenon of stardom, which was quite baffling for me then. I narrated the whole incident to S. Mukherjee Sahab the next day in the presence of Ashok Bhaiya. Ashok Bhaiya listened to my narration and, looking seriously at me, said, "It is a preview of what you are going to experience on a much bigger scale in the future." A handsome man like you will have trouble keeping the women away. He saw my expression and laughed heartily because it was well known by then at Bombay talkies how shy and formal I was in the presence of women. S. Mukherjee Sahab, who was in agreement with Ashok Bhaiya, was laughing too. I thought it was the right time to talk to both of them about stardom and what it entailed, as well as the impact it could have on an actor's mind and personality, especially if he had a dual image, his real self with his real name and personal and social background juxtaposed with his screen image with another name and personality, which changed from one fictitious character to another and from one film to another. Ashok Bhaiya noted that he would give stardom and success little importance because for him they were not the be all and end all of his existence. Stardom should never be more important for you than your self respect and your will to do what you want to do in the manner you want to do, he emphasized. I knew what he was meaning to say, and his attitude was obvious in the train when he jostled with the common folk who were his ardent fans. He was interacting with them as the real Ashok Kumar, completely divorced from his screen image and his stardom. It was S. Mukherjee Sahab who gave me an answer that has lingered in my mind since then. He pointed out to me that the distinction was easy to achieve if one understood that the actor is more important than the star. The star is a creation of marketing, and stardom is the result of the hard work of the actor when it finds mass acceptance and adulation. When fans will come to you someday, remember they are coming to see you and feel you because they have liked your acting and are touched by it. You should know that it is Dilip Kumar they are clamoring to meet. It was S. Mukherjee Sahab's wont to talk seriously and analytically when a topic aroused his intellectual interest. The professor in him surfaced at such times. He was in many ways my guru and a source of inspiration. He could explain to me in the simplest of terms the grammar of cinema. He took pains to take me behind the camera and show me how the camera sees the actor in front of it. It would make me view the way he would simulate the gait of a woman in front of the camera. It would be a funny sight, but seeing the act through the camera lens gave me the much needed help in understanding the relation between the camera and the actor facing it or turning his back to it under the light that is falling on him. He always liked to show his actors by performing what he wanted them to portray. He was very sharp in noticing not only technical flaws but also flaws in dialogue delivery and facial expressions. Above all, he had great respect for writers and believed that cinema's prime objective was to engage the viewer with imaginative storytelling. My formative years at Bombay Talkies were memorable for the lovely time I spent with Ashok Bhaiya and S. Mukherjee Sahab. They lived close to the studio those days, and I was always welcome in their homes to have hot bhajias. prepared by Ashok Bhaiya's wife Shobha Bhabhi. It was also wonderful to be in the company of Raj Kapoor again after our Khalsa college days. Raj was happy to know I had seriously entered the profession of film acting. I told you, didn't I? He said, hugging me like a little excited boy when I was ready for my debut. When we were at Khalsa, he used to tell me in Punjabi, "Tusi actor ban jao, tusi ho bade handsome. You should become an actor. You're very handsome." I thought then it was not my cup of tea. It was fine for him because his Papaji, that is Prithviraj Kapoor, was a great actor and one of the most handsome and virile men I had seen on the screen. Naturally, Raj and his younger brothers Shami and Shashi were all genetically gifted with talent and exceptional good looks. It did not seem a good proposition for me with the background I came from. At Bombay Talkies, Raj was regarded with respect and a measure of awe because he was Prithviraj's son. There was no actor or, for that matter, anyone who had anything to do with the performing arts who did not admire Prithviraj ji, whose commanding presence in the plays staged by Prithvi Theatres inspired awe. Raj neither showed off nor leveraged his father's eminence to get special treatment at the studio. He and I often slipped off to Ashok Bhaiya's house for a game of badminton in which Bhabiji also joined us, playing the game by her own rules and filling the air with her chatter and giggles. She enjoyed the game and the relief she got from the boredom of being alone in a large house. After the game, she would ask me and Raj to stay on for tea and bhajias. Ashok Bhaiya sometimes arrived while we were munching the bhajias and we would think it was time for us to leave because he was home after a long day's work. Ashok Bhaiya would have none of it. He would chide us and say jokingly, "You both should be ashamed of yourselves. You come here, eat such nice bhajias without me to give you company, and you want to leave without giving me a chance to play a game with you guys." We would then sheepishly stay back while Babiji promised more hot bhajias and hot tea. After such a frontal attack, we had no option but to acquiesce. Ashok Bhaiya was an agile badminton player. Raj was a splendid referee when we had played soccer on the grounds of Khalsa College, and he looked so robust when he stood on the field, whistle in hand, and refused to budge from his decisions. He got easily tired when we played badminton because he was least interested in the game. He was there more for the delicious bhajias. Both Ashok Bhaiya and Raj found my stamina incredible. I could only attribute it to the dry fruits I grew up on and the indomitable willpower I inherited from Akaji. There were days when S. Mukherjee Sahab joined us. He and Ashok Bhaiya carried on a continuous powwow in Bangla, which is a typical Bengali habit. When two Bengalis get together, they make no bones about bringing their personal lives into the ambit of their conversation in their mother tongue, while others who were in their company wonder what they are so engrossed about that they are talking and chuckling non-stop. One person who was a steady friend at Bombay Talkies was Jairaj ji. He was very different from the other people like Shah Nahaj Khan, and he took a keen interest in my work and gave me useful advice in his quiet manner. Jairaj ji and David Abraham were good friends and they exchanged jokes. The notable fact was that all the wonderful people I got to know and share great times with were older than I, except Raj Kapoor. I was barely 21 when I faced the camera for my first shot, and it was indeed my good fortune that senior professionals in the acting department and writers like Pandit Narendra Sharma and Bhagwati Charan Verma were there. Jayaraji was very protective, and even though we made very little conversation while traveling from Churchgate to Malad by train, we were very close as professionals. Bombay Talkies was in the process of changing hands at that juncture as Devika Rani was sure she did not want to continue with the management of the studio after her marriage to Svetoslav Roerich. By the time I had made my debut in 1944, she was contemplating voluntary retirement. She had appointed S. Mukherjee Saab and Amiya Chakraborty to take care of all the productions. She would nevertheless take her rounds of the studio and talk to everybody warmly. She was so stunning in her appearance that everyone in the studio stopped to look at her when she moved around. She made it a point to ask about me if I was not around, and if I ran into her, she asked me how I was doing and about my progress as a learner. Ashok Bhaiya was the only one who joked with her, and S. Mukherjee Saab was the only one she consulted about every step she took in the running of the studio. She introduced me once to Svetoslav Roerich, the famous Soviet painter she was going to marry. She told me how much Svetoslav loved the Kulu Valley, and she told him about my family's fruit business and how we got fruits from the valley: apples, cherries, and juicy pears. I looked at Roerich, who had a stately gait and a twinkle in his eyes exactly like Agaji. I thought she would be very happy with him the way Amma was with Agaji. As 1945 rolled by, the Second World War was coming to an end and the freedom movement was gaining momentum in the country. At the studio, every day, Ashok Bhaiya and S. Mukherjee Saab would engage in discussions about what they had heard or read. They would seriously discuss Muhammad Ali Jinnah's speeches and ask me for my opinion. Having had a memorable experience when I spoke my mind at the Wellington Soldiers Club in Pune, I thought it best to maintain a discreet silence. At home, Ayub Sahab used to be extremely well acquainted with the developments on the freedom movement front, and he would hold forth before avid listeners who were friends of Agaji and Chacha Umar. Agaji would feel very proud of Ayub Sahab's accomplishment and his fluency in Urdu, both spoken and written. Personally, I was equally awed by Ayub Saab's ability to speak and write well in English and Urdu despite not having had formal school education. As mentioned earlier, he had been taught at home due to ill health as a boy, and he was studious and painstaking as a homebound student. By the time I finished my work in Jugnu, our country was heading for its emancipation from British rule. I remember the day 15th August 1947 vividly, when independence was won for us by the great men and women who fought for it tenaciously and relentlessly for decades. I was walking on the pavement near the Churchgate station, quite unnoticed despite having acted in three films, Chor Bhata, Pratima, and Milan, when I noticed people were rushing homewards with joyous expressions on their faces. It was only when I reached home and I saw the whole family together for a change, with every face shining with happiness, that I realized it was Independence Day. I wasted no time in being a part of the celebration of the independence of India. Jugnu was released in late 1947. The film became a hit and the hoardings were put up in many places, including a site near Crawford Market. One morning, while Agaji was supervising the unloading of a consignment of apples at his wholesale shop in the market, Raj Kapoor's grandfather Basheshwar Nathji walked in and the two greeted each other warmly as always. They had been friends for years, and Agaji used to tell him jokingly that it was no use twiddling his impressive moustache because his son and grandson were in the acting business. Agaji felt the Kapoor boys were worthy of being in government services, which was the aspiration of most fathers for their sons those days. He knew Raj and I were studying in the same college, and those days getting a college education and acquiring a graduation certificate at a convocation held by the Bombay University was a big event. He was mighty displeased, therefore, that Raj Kapoor had chosen to be an actor and not an important government official like Basheshwar Nath Ji, who had held a high position as a commissioner in Peshawar. Basheshwar Nath Ji, however, was not at all unhappy that his son Prithviraj had chosen to become an actor and was very famous already, and his grandson Raj had begun to follow in the footsteps of Prithviraj. It was Akachi's ambition that I too would find a respectable government job and I would attain such an important position that I would have OBE as a suffix to my name. Agaji had seen that suffix somewhere and it fascinated him as a mark of esteem and honor. When he started going to college, he felt proud and he confided to me that his big dream was that I should write my name as Yusuf Khan OBE. That morning, Basheshnathji had a naughty smile playing beneath his moustache. He twirled his moustache and told Agachi he had something to show him, something that would take his breath away. Agaji must have wondered what it could be. Basheshwarnathji took him out of the market and showed him the large hoarding of Jugnu right across the road. He then said, "That is your son Yusuf." Agaji told me later on that he could not believe his eyes for a moment, but there was no mistaking me for someone else because the face he knew so well was printed large and the blurb on the hoarding was hailing the arrival of a bright new star on the silver screen. The name was not Yusuf, it was Dilip Kumar. Basheshnathji, who was standing next to him, was gleefully observing his expression and telling him that there was no need to be dismayed because I had adopted another name to keep the family honor intact. What was more important, I was on my way to big stardom. All those words were not music to Agachi's ears. He described to me much later, after he accepted my choice of career, the awful feeling of disappointment that overwhelmed him at that moment. He was naturally very angry. Agachi did not reveal his anger and hurt pride through harsh words or any other form of resentment. He was very quiet for some days and did not speak to me. Even at other times, when we spoke to each other in monosyllables, I did not dare to look him in the eye. Soon, the situation became awkward and I did not know what to do. The thick layer of ice had to be broken somehow. I confided in Raj and he said he knew this was going to happen and the best person to mediate was Prithviraj. And he was right. Prithviraj paid a casual visit to our home one day. Amma told me when I got home in the evening that the powwow with Prithviraj had done considerable good and she noticed that Agaji was a lot more relaxed and cheerful. I still did not have the courage to go up to him and start a conversation. The silence was broken by Agaji when he came home one evening after a visit to a family friend's house where he had heard praises about me and my emergence as the star of Jugnu. He saw me coming in and he called me as he always did and began talking to me with ease. I was relieved and happy considering that he was always upfront in giving expression to his thoughts and sentiments. He said quite matter of factly that he had come to terms with the reality that I had chosen a profession he had least expected me to enter. He always spoke to me in Pushtu, and his speech was clear and precise and never wanting in good taste. He was never loud, and I don't have even a faint recollection of any argument between my parents in front of us. If they had to sort out anything between them, they did it without our knowledge. He spoke to me that evening without anger or unhappiness. Thank you very much.